Where's? Welcome to the Diamond Keyway Conversation. Voice of the West Coast, voice of the culture. It's Duse M the Dime. This is part 3 of the Reggie Wright Jr. grand jury testimony. It's the transcripts of the Tupac murder trial charging Keefe D, Duane Keefe D Davis. You hit that like button on your way in if you ain't already did it. Subscribe to the channel if you ain't done that. And take your shoes off at the front door, man. Take them chucks off at the front door. We're going to get right into the content, man. We ain't going to even play no game. Let's go. So what we left off was it was only time that the club ever opened during Mr. Knight's reigns. Question: was it your understanding the hope was if this night went successfully, you guys would get proper certification and be allowed to open the club more and do more business at Club 662? Answer: you put it in the correct words, but yes, sir. Question: okay, now, were you given any instructions as to whether or not you all were allowed to have firearms at the club or in the city while you're trying to get this business deal down? Answer: so either myself or Mr. Khaleesi's in the meeting that I had with all of my security, who were mainly off-duty or retired police officers, and I informed them, or Mr. Khaleesi's, I forgot who it was, but I know I echoed it if I wasn't the one that said it. Banned them from having their firearms on them inside of the nightclub. Told them we didn't want that. We didn't want that night. Didn't want to see any guns. If they had a problem with it, don't come to work. Question: all right. Now I'm going to focus on your attention to the day of the Tyson-Selden fight. So we were on Friday. We're on Friday. Now we're moving on to Saturday, the day of the fight. Okay. Question: do you recall where you were staying? Answer: at the Luxor Hotel. Question: and was that where everybody else associated with death row was going to be staying? Answer: the staff, the working staff, and the artists. But Mr. Knight and about 3 of his friends, Mr. Knight had just purchased the home out here maybe 4 months prior. And, he had got a lot of renovation done to it. And as a matter of fact, we were having the next day a big family reunion. Well, meaning Sunday. We were planning to have he had a lot of his family members out, to go to the club, of course. And we were going to have a big family reunion. He was giving a big party because he wanted to show off his house. But they were at that house. Maybe about 4 of the people were going to be at the house. Question: so, but the artists like Shakur, the Outlaws, other artists that were coming out, they were staying at the Luxor? Answer: and even myself, I had a room at the Luxor. You were at the Luxor as well? Answer: yes. And question: and so other staff and security, they were staying at the Luxor as well? Answer: yes, sir. Question: okay. What time do you recall the Tyson fight was supposed to start? Answer: generally 7:30 to 8 o'clock. Question: is when you would want to be over there? Question: yeah, would want to be there. Yes, sir. Question: and when did Mr. Shakur and Mr. Knight arrive, if you know? Answer: well, question: at the Luxor? At the Luxor. Answer: oh, from driving from LA? Question: yeah. Answer: okay, about 3-ish, 4 p.m. that day. Yes, sir. Question: and did you see them when they arrived? Answer: I see Mr. Shakur for sure. I think Mr. Knight just came by the hotel. Don't remember him getting out or anything because it was like a rush because he was trying to get to the house. It was a little, rush. We always behind, running late. But he didn't get out and come in the hotel and walk around and mingle. Question: would you describe this night as being organized or unorganized? Answer: well, my side, I was the logistics guy. So I guess it would be my fault, but we were kind of an unorganized crew. Oh, yeah. It's definitely your fault. Question: was it your intention to go to the fight that night? Answer: initially, yes, sir. Question: what happened? Were you able to go to the fight? Answer: I didn't go because of issues at the club, of course, and us being unorganized, where to even the fact that Mr. Shakur called me looking for Mr. Knight, as everyone always did, and pretty much informed me that he's tired of going to the fight late because Mike Tyson fights usually be over back then in the first round. And that even Mr. Shakur, his music, he had rapped a song for him to enter the ring in and wanted to be there for that. And he and his security caught a cab over to the fight. Question: so Mr. Shakur took a cab to the MGM Grand for the fight? Answer: yes, sir, from the Luxor. Question: you mean his security? Do you recall who his security was then? Answer: yes, sir. Question: who was that? Answer: his name was Frank Alexander. Question: all right. So the same person you had talked about earlier. Answer: at the Soul Train? Yes, sir. Question: yes, okay. So when Mr. Shakur and Mr. Alexander are off to the MGM Grand, do you ever make it to the MGM Grand at all? Answer: I went by there, saw that parking, and we had little Nextel walkie-talkies, and I was getting a lot of feedback and issues with my security. And I just elected to go to the club to make sure everything was in order at the club. Question: is it fair to say your focus of this weekend was executing the club going off well? Answer: yes, sir. So this mother security guard wants us to believe that Suge Knight would have him taking care and doing this liquor license deal and focusing on the deal when his job is security. Not being Suge is out. Death Row's cracking. Why would he need you to do any of that? This shit is very revealing, man. Question: and were you aware of whether or not there was supposed to be a performance at the club that night? Answer: yes, sir. Question: who was supposed to perform that night at the club? Answer: well, I know an artist that we had just signed from Bad Boy Records. We had started up a Death Row East. His name was Craig Mack. He was going to perform there. But Mr. Shakur, who unintelligible, the guy worked out because he had done some community service that was needed. We were doing some community service where they were donating some of the proceeds to this boxer foundation for the Las Vegas Police Department. And so Mr. Shakur was going to be the one to perform, right? So Pac is performing because they're donating some of it to this foundation in Vegas for the Vegas Police Department. This is part of his community service, right? Question: okay, all right. And so that night, you spent most of the evening at Club 662 while Mr. Shakur and Mr. Knight and some of his entourage are at the MGM. Answer: yes, sir. Question: so you don't see the fight? You don't go in at all? Answer: yes, correct. Question: so while you're working on logistics at Club 662, how is that going as the evening progresses? Answer: I was kind of proud of it finally working the way it was supposed to work the club, as far as the crowd control outside, because we had contracted Las Vegas Police Department. I don't know if it was on duty or off duty, They contract the Las Vegas Police Department. Maybe they had inside man have those police caught up at 662. Oh, this is bad. Okay, but they were in uniform to control the parking lot and the crowd control from the back door on. And then my security had it from the inside of the door on. And it was very organized. Metro Police did a good job that night. Question: at some point, did you see people come to you and say, Hey, something has casually gone wrong that night. Answer, yeah. Question, can you tell us about that? Answer, don't know the approximate time. I guess it's like 11 o'clock, 11 or something, where two gentlemen that we talked about earlier, Roger Williams, a.k.a. Neckbone, and Alton McDonald, a.k.a. Buntry, like country, but with a B, came inside of the club, and they was like, Reggie, Suge and Pac just got shot down the street. I initially thinking they tripping because I wasn't with them, and Suge told you all to come here and tell me that. And they were like, no, we're serious. By this time, Mr. Khaleesi's was near me, George Khaleesi's, the attorney. He kind of confirmed it to me like, yeah. And I'm like, also seeing a few of the Las Vegas police that was working the door or working, the parking lot, or maybe visiting the guys that were working. I don't know, but they leaving with lights and sirens on going toward that area. So I kind of knew at that time. Question. So answer that it was true. Question. So prior to hearing from Buntry and Neckbone that Suge and Tupac had been shot, had you heard anything about a fight at the MGM or Southside, an issue with the Southside Crips at all? Answer, nothing. That's the only problem I had with my security. Mr. Alexander, that he didn't notify me when it transpired. But he said his walkie-talkie, because we had Nextels back then where they could operate like two-way radios, they had a dual, it could be a phone or it could be a walkie-talkie. He didn't notify me, but that was his first day back from being off for like a month, and he said his walkie-talkie hadn't gotten his walkie-talkie or it was dead, something like that. But no one had told me what happened, which, to be honest, a fight, it was kind of common. Question, yeah, okay. Yeah, I was going to, a follow-up question was, working for doing security for Death Row Records by this time for about a year and a half, and having moonlit for years before that. Were fights common or uncommon? Answer, kind of common. Question, was it something that you would have been overly concerned about if you had heard that there was a fight? Answer, if it would have been explained to me in the magnitude it was, yes. But just that, hey, they got into a fight with some guys at the MGM? No. Question, so you're talking about the magnitude of who it was. Did you later come to learn that the person the fight was with Orlando Anderson? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and at that time, were you aware that Mr. Anderson was a member of the Southside Crips? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and what did that give you concern? Somebody who knew gangs from growing up in Compton, gangs from patrol, gangs from just working with Death Row, would it have given you some concern that there was an altercation with a significant member of the Southside Crips? Answer, yes, sir. Question, now when Buntry and Neckbone came out there, did you ever see their car? Answer, yes, sir. Question, did you notice anything different about their car from when you last saw it? Answer, yes, sir. Question, what did you notice? Answer, that there was a bullet hole in the left fender of his black Toyota Supra. Question, and prior to that incident, or prior to seeing it that night, had you ever noticed that bullet hole before? Answer, no, sir. Question, and was it your knowledge that it was common practice for guys from the neighborhood, gang members, to immediately fix bullet holes in their vehicles? Answer, you don't drive around with a car that has bullet holes in it. Mainly not so much for the embarrassment of having a gunshot, but because the police generally harass you a little more, because generally they believe, and I believe when I was a police officer, someone had just recently been shot at and they carry a gun to protect themselves because, one, they either have issues with somebody, or two, maybe in fear of, I'd rather be judged than carried. Question, so we had talked about at the beginning of this that your father, Reggie Wright Sr., was a lieutenant in the gang unit right around this time. Is that fair to say? Answer, he was. Question, so was he in Vegas or was he in Compton during this time, during the night of the shooting? Answer, no, he was in Compton. Well, I guess he was at home. So he's saying that that's not his dad on that camera. Crazy. Question, you don't know, but to your knowledge, he definitely wasn't in Vegas. Answer, he wasn't in Vegas. No. Question, did you go after the shooting? Did you ultimately make your way down to UMC? Answer, yes, sir. Question, did you drive there or did someone else drive you there? Answer, no, Mr. Khaleesi's the attorney, George, because I didn't know my way around Vegas like that, but he drove me to the hospital. And during this time, do you see Mr. Knight? Answer, yes. About 2 hours probably after the shooting, I seen him in the emergency room at the hospital. Question, it's fair to say that he survived that shooting? Answer, yes, sir. Question, to your recollection, did he stay there for a few days or was he released that night? Answer, no, he left. I left prior to him getting released, but I was back at his house about 7 in the morning and he was there. Question, and Mr. Shakur, was he still in the hospital? Answer, yes, sir. Question, were there a lot of friends, associates, and people who were actually at the incident gathering at the hospital while Mr. Shakur was being treated? Answer, yes, definitely later, not initially upon my arrival, but during that night, yes, sir. Question, and were they upset? Answer, very. Question, were they emotional? Answer, very. Question, would it be fair to say or unfair to say that they were under the distress of what they had just experienced? Mr. Shakur getting shot at? Answer, I guess they would be, yes, that's fair. Question, did you talk to any of these people about what happened? Without getting into the details of what they said, did you talk to them? Answer, I mean, people were, the tension was up there. The artists, the people, not the guys, meaning the homeboys, maybe talk to them a little later. It was mainly like the people from the club that heard about it and started filtering themselves over, which would have been people that didn't have too much, question. But did you talk to some of the homeboys and some of the artists about what had gone on? Answer, yeah. Question, and as a result of talking to the homeboys and the artists about what went on, did you call your father? Answer, yes. And why would you call your father? Answer, well, initially I called him just to tell him, hey, Tupac and Suge just were shot. Now I know probably later, and I'm sure I was calling and talking to him all that night, but I do remember relaying something to him. So you don't know why you called your father after this happened, but you're sure that you were calling and talking to him all that night. But I do remember relaying something to him. So you let him know about them being shot, let them know it was a successful hit, that they both were hit, and you went to the hospital, you checked on them, and you let them know what their status was. That Suge was still there. You left before him because he was still alive, right? And Pac was still alive and was to die, I think, on the 6th day. Question, and like later that night, meaning like around 3, 4, 5, 6, sometime that evening, did you feel the need to relay information to your father? Answer, yeah, because I had learned that it was regarding an incident that happened at the MGM and that it had something to do with some gentlemen from the Southside Compton Crips. And I knew the gentlemen from the neighborhood that were associated with us. The Mapa Rules in the Ludus Park were very upset about it. Question, were you concerned that there would be subsequent violence in Compton as a result of what happened in Las Vegas? Answer, yes, sir. Question, And contacting your father, who was the lieutenant of the gang unit, seemed like information he should know? Answer, yes, sir. Question, all right. Of course, in the 27 years since the shooting on September 6th of 1996, there have been all sorts of theories who was responsible for shooting Mr. Tupac Shakur. You're aware of that, right? Answer, yes, sir. Question, in fact, you're aware of one particular theory that you yourself are responsible for the shooting of Mr. Shakur. Isn't that right? Answer, yes, sir. So, Reggie, how are you going to get mad that it's public knowledge that you're a suspect in the Tupac murder? But here you is on the grand jury in the Keefe D trial as a witness. Kind of self-serving. Look kind of guilty from this angle. I'm just saying, my nigga, it's common knowledge. There's a strong theory in a large percentage of us that believes you and them crooked pigs was responsible for the unaliving and you orchestrated it. Allegedly. That's just what a lot of people believe. You know what I'm saying? Veggies got bodies. Allegedly, is what everybody is saying. So, okay, I have to ask you, are you responsible in any way for the shooting and killing of Mr. Shakur? Answer, no, sir. Question, finally, is it true that in 2017 you were convicted of a felony sales of marijuana? Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was there another felony as well that you were convicted of? Answer, money laundering associated to the sales of the marijuana. Wait a minute. Reg, you always lied to me and just said all you got was the weed. And I said, no, you got the money laundering too. You told me I was lying. Hold on. So for money laundering, all right, so let's see what they say. Yeah, you could get up to 20 years for money laundering. 18 USC 1956 and 1957 being central to these charges, violations of Section 1956, which prohibits engaging in financial transactions with the proceeds of unlawful activity, can result in imprisonment for up to 20 years. Additionally, fines can reach up to $500,000 or twice the value of the monetary instruments involved, whichever amount is the greater. So, and then it says a related statute, Section 1957, addresses engaging in monetary transactions exceeding 10,000 in criminally derived property. Convictions under the section carry a maximum prison sentence of 10 years. So he didn't get the 20, he didn't get the 10. Oh, Reggie. Let us find out you did some telling, Reggie. Well, it doesn't surprise us. I mean, we all know you you give information, exchange valuable information with the cops. So let's go ahead and go to back to the paperwork. I got the work. Answer, yes, sir. Question, and was there another felony? Oh, he said money laundering associated to the sales of the marijuana. Question, and those were felonies in federal court. Is that fair? Answer, that's correct. Mr. Palau, do any members of the grand jury have any questions for Mr. Wright Jr.? Yes, sir, by a juror. Question, did your security team know that the Southside Crips were here? And if so, do you know why they were here? Answer, to be honest, that night, everybody that thought they had a little bit of money in the urban communities came to my fights from every neighborhood. And to say that they knew that they were here, no, sir. But Mike Tyson fights back then in urban communities were big things. Question, so it's fair to say that they should have assumed that those guys would be there. Answer, that would be correct. But we never thought something like that would happen in Vegas. Question, they didn't ask you that. He always trying to clear something up to push his narrative, defend his position. Why are you defensive when he asks you that question? Adding more than he asked, a denial. Question, and to clear that up a little bit, you had mentioned you were here 3 times before for fights. Is that correct? Answer, that's correct. Question, and when you said people from the neighborhood, fair to say a lot of gang members would come out to Vegas for Tyson fights. Yeah, that's what I mean by urban community areas. So when they say urban community areas, cops like Reggie Wright are talking about gang members. So your community makes you a gang because it's organized, it's structured, right? You guys have unity amongst each other. That's what they label gangs. The fact that we organize ourselves and attach a name is demonized and called a gang. It's a village. It's a tribe. But anyway, the most recent thing that I can compare it to for people, like when you all had an all-star weekend out here, was generally how the Mike Tyson fights worked back then. Question. And so it wouldn't necessarily be surprising to see all sorts of different gang members, both from Paru sets, Blood sets, Crip sets, to be out here for a fight. Answer, that's correct. And even at our club, to be honest, question. And you did not, well, let me ask you this. Did you expect there to be any violence out here just because people from different sets were out here? Answer, not because of anything that was going back in our neighborhood, but question, just a new beef. Answer, yeah. Question, people sometimes will get into arguments out here for all sorts of reasons. Answer, correct. Question, but you didn't think the Compton politics, the gang politics, would make it out to Vegas. Is that fair? Answer, correct. That's correct. By a juror. Question, so there was no rumor. Well, you said you got all these people from LA coming up. There could be trouble. There was no rumor prior to that you know of that something big was going to happen to somebody big. Answer, not, I mean, the rumor of the chain snatching, we knew that there were problems with the Southside Compton Crips, but that's every day, even before the chain snatching, to be honest. Parus and Crips generally. Question, but not like the night of the fight. Something is going to go down. Answer, generally, they will be respectful in clubs unless an incident is really on, or something like that happen. But to see them, we wouldn't have expected it to have been an issue, just like when we saw them at the Soul Train Awards. It wasn't an issue because of Bad Boy. It was because it was the Parus or the South Side that were having a problem. We're 8 miles wide. We go to the same schools, date the same young ladies. We see each other. So he included himself as part of the community, even though he's distinguished himself as law enforcement, right? So retaliation that was expected for the chain attempted snatching, you guys thought at this time that that was over, the retaliation was over? Answer, oh, no, sir. Just you talking about from the Lakewood incident until if they would, as they did, if they would have saw them, the person that perpetrated it, there probably would have been an incident, but they didn't expect to see them. it was by coincidence that they did see the gentleman. How do you know it was by coincidence? How do you know that if you believe the theory that Keefe D and Baby Lane and these niggas in the white Cadillac were there by happy chance, coincidence, then why did they bustle you in the first place and come get y'all? But anyway, let's get back to it. Well, I just had to wet my whistle. So, but that wasn't the target that night? Answer, that wasn't the target. Mr. Palau, can I clarify? A juror, by Mr. Palau. Question, were you aware whether or not Ma Paru was hunted for Orlando Anderson or other Southside Crips that night? Answer, I don't honestly think Trayvon Lane knew who he was until he saw him at the MGM and say, oh, that's him. There he is. Question. So to your knowledge, Trayvon Lane did not know Orlando Anderson by name? Answer. Correct. He just knew question by face. Answer. And where they were from. And they generally know that because of their attire. They wear S's on their hats. They wear jerseys and stuff like that. And like I said, we kind of knew each other, but I can't honestly say if Trayvon knew. But I think when he saw Mr. Anderson in the club, he was like shocked and like, hey, there go that guy that tried to take my chain a couple months ago. Question. I think the point is you guys didn't have a plan like, hey, when we go out to Vegas, we're going to find these Southside guys and we're going to get them. Answer. Correct. Mr. Palau, yes, sir, by a juror. Question, do you still have your death row pennant? Answer, yes, sir, the foreperson. Any more questions? By law, these proceedings are secret, and you are prohibited from disclosing to anyone anything that transpired before us, including evidence presented to the grand jury, any event occurring or a statement made in the presence of the grand jury, information obtained by the grand jury. Failure to comply with this admonition is a gross misdemeanor punishable up to 364 days in the Clark County Detention Center and a $2,000 fine. In addition, you may be held in contempt of court punishable by an additional $500 fine and 25 days in the Clark County Detention Center. Do you understand this admonition? The witness, yes, sir. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. The foreperson, thank you. You're excused. The witness, thank you. The foreperson, can we speak, please? Mr. Digiacamo. Digiacamo. Actually, we're going to cut it right now. So just give us 1 second to get them out of the room. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that completes the presentation for today. Enjoy your long weekend, right? And then you got it signed, the affirmation, some more information. Then you got this stuff on the jurors, right? Right. All of this is just the documents that go with it. But that was Reggie Wright Jr. on the stand, part 3, which is the last one we're going to be doing of this series. So we'll close this out. And I want to just break down some of his inconsistencies. You know what I'm saying? You know, one thing about pork, but he throws out and muddies the water so much, right? Okay, so no, that's not the one. So let's go this way. Let's go here. And that's not it. Boom. One more again. Maybe I should edit. No, y'all gonna have to. If I gotta go through it, y'all gotta go through it. Contradictions in grand jury testimony. So let's get this going. Boom. All right. So let me get these. Contradictions between role and claimed ignorance. Right? Wright was head of security for Death Row Records, a role requiring comprehensive knowledge of staff, threats, and logistics. Yet he claimed he never had a serious conversation with Suge Knight about the Tupac shooting. He never heard Suge order violence or retaliation. He didn't know if his own staff had gang affiliations or engaged in criminal conduct. This is not credible for someone responsible for the label's safety during a period of intense conflict, suggesting either willful ignorance or dishonesty. I tend to push that very hardly, that he definitely was responsible for the label's safety, thus making all of these lies and or trying to be held accountable for negligence. His credibility is shot, right? Hospital non-appearance versus security duties. Wright said he didn't go to the hospital after Tupac's shooting because Suge didn't want visitors and the place was locked down, given that his client had just been shot in a high-profile drive-by. This contradicts his responsibility as head of security. Failing to respond or at least debrief after such an event undermines the legitimacy of his claimed role. That's a fact. But he said that he did go to the hospital briefly. So you have that inconsistency. Y'all forget he said that he went in there, Suge, he left, but he left before Suge was released. Suge was still alive. He had to get up out of there, regroup, and talk to his handlers. Security presence at events. Wright claimed none of his security team was present at the MGM Grand or Club 662 the night of the shooting. However, surveillance footage and independent reports show Death Row security and affiliates visibly present, especially during the beatdown of Orlando Anderson at the MGM. His denial appears to be a calculated effort to distance himself and his team from involvement in the prelude to Tupac's murder. Denial of knowing Keefe D versus context. Wright insisted he never spoke to Keefe D and only knew of him through media. This is contradicted by their shared circles in Compton, as well as the fact that Keefe D later admitted to his role in the Tupac shooting. For someone as connected as Wright, this claim of total unfamiliarity strains his credibility. Again, I push heavily, his credibility is strained. Poochie's role dismissed despite known ties. Wright described Wardell Poochie Faust as a mere errand boy and claimed no knowledge of his violent activity. However, Poochie has been publicly identified in law enforcement investigations as the alleged shooter of Biggie's murder and a trusted death row enforcer. Wright's minimization contradicts external evidence and widespread reports. Coincidental identification versus group retaliation behavior. Wright states that Orlando Anderson's confrontation was unplanned and happened only because he was spotted wearing an S on his hat. However, the immediate and collective attack by death row affiliates suggests coordination or a standing expectation of retaliation. The notion of it being spontaneous contradicts the behavior of the group and prior tension from the chain snatching incident. Alleged lack of gang oversight versus hiring practices. Wright claimed he didn't vet the gang affiliations of his staff or discipline them for misconduct, yet he hired multiple known Paru members and operated in a climate where gang affiliations were not only relevant, but central to the death row's internal politics. As a former Compton police officer, his denial of knowledge appears disingenuous. So we're going to end that one. And now we're going to go to some of these other ones. You just got to take notes, man. And make sure that y'all paying attention to what we paying attention to. So Wright repeatedly distances himself from the foresight or intent related to gang violence, framing the events as coincidental or spontaneous. However, the specifics he gives, such as immediate recognition, known attire, and a statement that retaliation would have occurred if Orlando had been spotted, suggests foreknowledge or readiness to act violently. His pattern of couching facts and hypotheticals while withholding direct claims appears calculated, very calculated, as if he might have been trained by intelligence agencies. Page 2, Reggie Wright Jr. So on page 2, Reggie Wright Jr. is sworn in. He introduces himself and confirms understanding of the advertisement regarding his testimony, basic credentials on. Page 3, Wright testified about growing up in Los Angeles and later Compton. He confirms his father, Reginald Wright Sr., was a police officer who eventually led the gang and homicide unit in Compton. Wright also acknowledges that he grew up among gang members, specifically in the Ma Paru and Ludus Park area. Page 4. Wright confirms knowing Marion Suge Knight since childhood and says they were school acquaintances. He recalls playing football with Suge in high school and attending Verbum Day High School before transferring to Linwood. Page 5. He joined the Compton Police Department as a jailer while attending college and eventually becoming a patrol officer in 1990. He names officers in the gang unit, including his father and Tim Brennan. No evasiveness noted here. So they said it was no evasiveness noted here, right? On page page, hold on, I'm on the wrong page. On page 5, no evasiveness was noted on that page. Page 6, Wright discusses moonlighting while off duty, including eventually working for Death Row Records. He says the department had a permit process for side jobs, but enforcement was inconsistent. His explanation of the work permit system lacks detail on whether he complied personally. He glosses over that fact. Why wouldn't he? Page 7. He lists prior moonlighting jobs like nightclubs, hotels, and movie sets, claiming his job was to guard equipment and keep gang members away. His portrayal of gang interactions with production crews seems generalized and lacks concrete incidents, which may suggest minimizing liability. Page 8. Wright described Death Row as a gangster rap label led by Suge Knight. He affirmed familiarity with Suge and says he started working for him around 1994. No deceit is apparent, but he offers little detail on the structure or legality of the security setup. On page 9, I noted that he explained the origin of his work with Suge. His father warned Suge that Suge's own hires might rob him. Wright says he doesn't remember how he got in touch with Suge, which is suspicious given the importance of the meeting. He also admits, yeah, you're definitely going to remember how you got back in contact with him because this was going to give you your own company, and you'll be moonlighting with some of the biggest stars, A-list celebrities in Hollywood, in the United States, protecting them. What, you wouldn't have forgot that. He also admits being attracted to the fame and lifestyle around Suge, which he describes in broad terms. Page 10. Wright recounts the meeting with Suge and his father, where his father refused to work for Death Row, citing open investigations into Suge's associates. Wright, however, got involved through a recommended contact, Lieutenant Danny Sneed, and joined the security company that served Death Row. His narrative sounds sanitized and carefully curated to emphasize professionalism while avoiding culpability. Page 11. Wright admits being attracted to Suge Knight's luxurious lifestyle, including attending the Super Bowl. He confirms his father declined to work for Death Row, citing conflicts due to his active investigations into Suge associates. Wright appears honest here. Page 12. Wright describes his security role as part of Code 4 security and serving as a street supervisor. Let's pause right here. Page 12, when I heard he described his security role as part of Code 4 security, what does Code 4 mean in police talk? I'm not sure. Let me see. But just hearing Code 4, let me see. Code 4. What does Code 4 mean to cops? Code 4. Code 4 typically indicates a situation is under control and no further assistance is needed. So they controlling the situation. Essentially, that's what that was supposed to mean. So let me go ahead and get back to this. So let me blow this up so y'all can see it without straining your eyes. All right. So page 13, after re-injury to his ankle, Wright medically retires from the Compton PD and becomes more involved in death row security. He confirms this transition started around April 1995 and became official by January 1996. Page 14, Wright founded Right Way Protective Services with Death Row Records and his main client. He explains that the company provided security at Death Row's offices, at Death Row studios, and Death Row events. No clear evasiveness was noted on that page. I couldn't see him. See, he comes with so much truth, right? And you'll get caught up in the truth because then he'll start feeding you narratives and twists and turns in the story. So once you get lulled into the truth, like on page 14, you got to be very careful because on page 15, he described various office locations, including the Murdoch Plaza, Larry Flint Building, and 8200 Wilshire. These house PR, art, and admin staff, not artists. This suggests a formal business structure at odds with the gang affiliation claims later, though no direct contradiction yet. So note that. Page 16, Wright says that the Tarzana-based Can-Am studio was the primary music production site and that he provided security there. He names major artists including Snoop Dogg, Calvin Broadus, and Dr. Dre, Andre Young, confirming Dre was also a co-owner of Death Row Records. No deceit noted there. So 16, he tell more truth. Page 17, he admits being with Suge roughly 60% of the time, but not formally serving as his bodyguard. Wright distinguishes himself from Suge's larger entourage. mostly composed of recently released Ma Paru gang members. So now Reggie always try to act and say the homies this and the homies that, but here he is on page 17 trying to build separation between Suge's larger entourage, mostly composed of the convict mob Paru niggas that just got out. You know what I'm saying? The division between personal and professional roles is somewhat blurred. It's definitely somewhat blurred. On page 18, I noted that Wright confirmed Suge Knight's affiliation with Mob Paru. So he snitched on Suge being a Mob Paru. If Suge wanted that to be known, he could at this stage, then he could have let him know. Mob as members of the Bloods. When asked how a former cop could work closely with gang-affiliated individuals, Wright claims they respected law enforcement back then, an assertion that seems oversimplified and possibly minimize intentions. So, yeah, that was definitely weird, talking about the gangs respecting law enforcement despite what comes out. Man, I don't respect them pigs. Fuck the police. Page 19. He credits his father's community standing and implied authority as reasons why gang members did not challenge them. He also suggests that fear of his father, then a senior gang unit officer, contributed to their deference. This again skirts direct accountability. Page 20. I found that Wright acknowledges a developing rivalry between Death Row and Bad Boy Records. He attributed its origin to a breakdown in what had been a cooperative relationship between Suge and Sean Puffy Combs. This marks the beginning of the East Coast and West Coast narrative. Right. So the beginning of the East Coast and West Coast narrative, the crooked cops and those that were benefiting off of that all started with Reggie Wright. That's what it's saying right there. Wasn't no East Coast. They had Death Row East. It was real niggas and fake niggas, riders and punks. That's what he said. So let's get to this one. Page 21. Wright explained the rivalry escalated after the November 1994 Quad Studio shooting at Tupac Shakur in New York. So he is putting gas on all of this stuff like it's against the whole East Coast, which Tupac blamed on Bad Boy. Wright claims Suge thought Sean Combs was behind Tupac's robbery and that things changed between the camps. Wright does not dispute this belief, but presents it passively, not clarifying Suge's actual knowledge or response. On page 22, I noted that Wright recounts the 1995 Source Awards where Suge made a veiled comment about Puffy. He avoids a direct opinion on whether the comment was provocative. His neutrality seems calculated, considering his position at the time and personal loyalty to Suge. On page 23, I noted, Reggie notes that Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip, was involved in a 1996 altercation at Lakewood Mall where a Death Row affiliate was robbed of a Death Row medallion. Wright says he learned about it later, suggesting he was not present or directly involved. The timeline of when he learned about the incident is vague and suspect, given his central role. Here goes the orca. Mr. Wright names Trayvon Lane as the victim of the medallion robbery and describes his role at Death Row. Wright indicates this robbery led to growing tension, but he fails to detail any internal Death Row discussion or planning in response, which seems unlikely. On page 25, I noted Wright gives background on Death Row's presence in Las Vegas for the Tyson fight on September 7th, 1996. He confirms he was in Vegas but stayed at a different hotel. This distancing, both physical and narrative, is suspicious, especially since he later discusses Suge's movements in detail. You discussed all of Suge's movements in detail, but you were very suspicious about where you were at in Vegas, your movement, etc. Right? Crazy. On page 26, I noted that Wright says he watched the Tyson fight on TV in a different hotel while Suge, Tupac, and others were ringside. He does not explain why he was not with the main group despite being head of security. This separation is unusual and may suggest he is avoiding association with what followed. Page 26. Wright says he only learned of the altercation with Orlando Anderson at the MGM Grand after it happened. He repeats that he wasn't present and gives a third-party account of what happened, again, insulating himself from knowledge or involvement. On page 28, Wright claims he didn't know about the altercation until being told later that night. Wright's repeated denials of firsthand knowledge about a central event involving key death row personnel raised doubts, given his high position and proximity to Suge. If you didn't know these things, why weren't you doing your job? You are not a promoter. This is nasty work, bro. On page 29, I noted that Wright says he went to Club 662 later that night, but didn't see Suge or Tupac there. His testimony continues to distance himself from all major actors and events that night. He doesn't mention who he was with, which weakens the credibility of his account. Page 30. He confirms learning that Tupac had been shot later that night. He does not give details about his reaction, whether he spoke to Suge or what he did afterwards. An odd omission for someone so deeply connected to death row and who is their security. On page 31, I noted that Wright says he found out about the shooting of Tupac when a female associate named Charity, a friend of Suge's, called him. He claimed Suge was crying and unable to explain what happened. His description of how he learned the details is emotionally loaded, yet lacks clarity about his follow-up steps as a security. Of course you're going to take follow-up steps. Of course you're going to note and try to figure out what didn't go right. He never had an inkling to do that, or so he wants us to believe. On page 32, Wright testifies that he didn't know the shooting location initially and had to be told Suge was at University Medical Center. He never addresses why he, as head of security, wasn't involved immediately or in any coordinated response. This continued detachment seems implausible. On page 33, I noted that Wright says he did not go to the hospital that night, claiming Suge did not want visitors. He also says the hospital was on lockdown. Avoiding the hospital altogether after a shooting of your primary client is highly questionable and not explained convincingly. On page 34, I noted that Wright states he did not see Suge until the next day at Club 662. Then says Suge looked dazed and was wearing a bandage. This confirms a face-to-face meeting post-shooting, but Wright doesn't clarify what was discussed. The absence of conversation content is suspicious. On page 35, Wright claims that he never discussed the shooting with Suge in any meaningful way afterward, and that Suge was shut down when asked. This is implausible, especially since Wright was a key figure in the company, and insecurity. Failure to debrief is not credible. Facts. On page 36, I peeped that when asked directly who shot Tupac, Wright says he doesn't know. He adds that there were rumors, but doesn't expand on them. The vagueness and unwillingness to elaborate on widespread industry knowledge reads as avoidance. Page 37. I noted that he confirmed hearing about rumors about Orlando Anderson was involved, but insists he had no firsthand information. He also distances himself from LAPD and Las Vegas investigations. His refusal to mention what he likely knew, even from internal sources, appears calculated. So they're playing to the script that his handlers gave. Page 38. Wright says he cooperated with Las Vegas Police Department, but offers no details on what he told them or whether he was ever considered a suspect or person of interest. This vagueness, again, raises concern. On page 39, he reaffirms that his own security personnel were not present at the MGM Grand or Club 662 that night. This statement contradicts previous information that he ran death row security and suggests a strategic distancing from the actual events. This shit is getting more and more sus, dog. A veggie wrong used a dirty, nasty, slimy pig. Pork butt. Page 40. I noted that Wright claimed he did not speak to Suge again about the shooting and began focusing on his security business and the broader death row fallout. His lack of curiosity or follow-up, given Tupac's prominence and Suge's proximity, is not believable. Page 41. Wright is asked again about his discussions with Suge post-shooting and repeats that Suge didn't want to talk about it. He describes Suge as shutting down emotionally. This portrayal, while consistent with prior claims, still stretches credibility given Wright's security leadership role. On page 42, I noted Wright states that after Tupac's death, things started to unravel at death row. Suge was jailed for a parole violation, and Wright claims he began distancing himself. He does not elaborate on what steps he took or what decisions he made, vague and seemingly designed to deflect responsibility. Page 43. Wright discusses tensions within death row post-shooting, including growing factionalism among Mob Paru members. He acknowledges conflicts but avoids naming specific individuals or actions, which may be deliberate to shield others or himself. Might be a lot more investigation going in pork butt. So, page 44, Wright describes trying to maintain professional order, but when asked about specific threats of misconduct, he claims not to remember details. This selective amnesia is suspicious, especially for a security leader in a known volatile environment. Page 45, he confirms knowledge of a conflict between Orlando Anderson and death row affiliates. When asked if there was, let me pause this real quick. You know what I'm saying? So, page 46, Wright claims he tried to keep things clean and discourage retaliation. However, he fails to name specific steps taken, people warned, or meetings held. The generality of his answer undermines his credibility. Page 47. He is asked about his knowledge of Reggie Wright is asked about his knowledge of who was in the white Cadillac that allegedly pulled up next to Suge's car and shot Tupac. He again pleads ignorance, despite acknowledging industry rumors pointing to specific Crip members. The refusal to acknowledge any insight is highly questionable. On page 48, when asked about Keefe D, Duane Davis, Wright acknowledges hearing his name tied to the Cadillac, but insists he doesn't know if Keefe D was involved. He deflects repeatedly by stating he only heard rumors, never offering more than surface commentary. That's all he's been offering. And they've been accepting it because the police want to spin their narrative. Let's get to page 49. He is questioned on whether he believed Combs, Puffy was involved in the shooting. He says Suge and others did believe that, but he personally had no opinion. Given his access and proximity, this neutrality is almost certainly strategic deflection. Page 50. Wright ends this portion by again minimizing his knowledge of the details, reiterating that his focus was on security, not gang activity. This defense has become a consistent theme, one that seems deliberately used to shield himself from implication. Page 51. Wright is asked whether he ever personally interacted with Keefe D. He says they've never spoken directly, only seen each other. Given the size and overlap between death row and Crip circles at that time, this seems doubtful and may be an intentional minimization. On page 52, Wright continues claiming he knows of Keefe D only by reputation and media stories. Again, this is hard to believe for someone embedded in death row security world during that period. His testimony lacks depth or specificity, particulars. It reads as intentionally vague. On page 53, Wright is asked about Wardell Poochie Faust, a known Mob Paru and Suge associate. He affirmed knowing Poochie but calls him a runner and says he never had real security duties. He does not elaborate on Poochie's criminal activity or later implication in Biggie's murder, which appears to be intentional omission. You said you believe Poochie did him. Why you didn't want to talk about that or dig deep into that? Why did you evade that subject matter, Reggie Wright Jr.? Page 54. I noted that Reggie claims to not know about Poochie's involvement in any violence and says he only knew him as Suge's errand guy. Given that Poochie was widely believed to be deeply involved in death row enforcer work, this answer seems deceptive by omission. Page 55. When asked if he believes Poochie was the shooter in Biggie's murder, Wright defers to Greg Caden's public claims, but does not endorse or deny them. His neutrality again seemed designed to avoid taking a side or offering meaningful information. Page 56. Wright says Suge never discussed Biggie's murder with him. He claims not to know if Suge ordered retaliation. As head of security, it strains credibility that he wouldn't know anything about the biggest murder case affecting their label. Page 57, Wright suggests the LAPD's investigation was flawed and that they misleads. However, when asked for specific, he demurs, offering generalities about police dysfunction without pointing to errors. This tactic shift focus from Suge or death row without offering substance. Right? On page 58, Wright denies knowing anything about the planning or logistics of Biggie's shooting. He continues emphasizing that his role was only security, not involved in artist decisions or gang-related retaliation. The repetition of this defense suggests coach testimony. Yeah, I say so for sure, bro. What y'all say in the chat? Let me know if y'all agree with my position, man. Wright is questioned about rumors that he cooperated with the FBI. He admits speaking with them, but only to deny wrongdoings. He frames his interactions as protective rather than informative, distancing himself from being an informant or insider. Yeah, we always see him doing that. I don't know if y'all catch it when I'm talking to him, but that's one of his regular tactics, trying to distance himself from being an informant as if it's a difference. The biggest hypocritical positions he's ever taken, man. I ever seen anyone take, right? On page 60, Reggie Wright Jr. insists he never provided law enforcement with inside information on Suge, Ma Paru, or others at death row. His emphasis on loyalty and refusal to disclose any wrongdoing or name reinforces the impression that he is withholding damaging details. Page 61. Wright is asked about others who may have been involved in retaliation following Tupac's death. He claims ignorance, stating that he was focusing on securing business and contracts. The continued disinterest in events impacting his entire client base is questionable. Y'all tell me what y'all thinking at this point about veggie wrong, veggie wrong, veggie wrong, veggie wrong. You know what I mean? So, all right, let me fix this real quick. I gotta hook my phone up. I'm not getting no all right. So we'll get back to the content. Finna knock this out for real, for real. So on page 62, Wright Jr. acknowledges being aware of growing tensions between the Bloods and Crips, but insists he stayed out of it. He doesn't address how much violence might have impacted his work or safety planning, which seems implausible. On page 63, when asked whether Suge ever ordered violence, Wright responds that he never heard Suge give direct orders. He again leans on rumors, but claims to never have had firsthand knowledge. This repeated denial undercuts his credibility due to his proximity. On page 64, Wright admits that people may have done things in Suge's name, but he distances Suge from giving explicit instructions. This passive framing shifts blame onto unnamed actors and again avoids implicating Suge directly. Page 65. Wright is asked about hiring practices for security staff. Wright admits many came from gang backgrounds, but insists they were reliable. He fails to address how these affiliations may have contributed to ongoing criminal activity. Page 66. Wright denies that any security staff were armed at official events, though he vaguely acknowledges they may have carried weapons off duty. This is likely deceptive given known instances of armed confrontations involving death row affiliates. On page 67, Wright is asked about affiliations within his staff. Wright avoids giving specific names or gang ties, saying only that he didn't ask. This is implausible for a security boss hiring within a highly charged gang environment. Page 68. Wright states that no one was ever terminated for misconduct related to gang violence, claiming that wasn't part of his responsibilities. This response deflects accountability and seems engineered to avoid implicating himself in negligence. On page 69, Wright denies knowledge of staff engaging in criminal behavior while employed. Despite numerous reports of such conduct, his sweeping denial appears intentionally misleading, given the violent reputation of death row's entourage. Page 70. Wright concludes this portion of testimony by stating he left the industry after Suge went to prison. He frames his role as administrative and security only, again, downplaying any deeper involvement or knowledge of criminal activity. The testimony ends with a carefully maintained image of distance and denial. Page 71. Wright acknowledges that although Compton gang politics were intense, they didn't expect it to escalate in Las Vegas. He admits there was tensions between Pirus and Southside Crips due to a prior chain snatching incident involving Trayvon Lane, but claims they didn't anticipate anything major that night. His statement about how generally they will be respectful in clubs sounds speculative and minimizes the risk they knew existed. He fails to address the strategic risk of known rival gangs attending the same high-profile event. Page 72, Wright says retaliation for the chain snatching was not anticipated that night because they didn't expect to run into the perpetrator, Orlando Anderson. He admits that had they seen him, something probably would have happened, which subtly confirms they were predisposed to violence and for confrontation arose. He again states that Anderson wasn't specifically targeted in advance. However, this seems contradicted by the ease with which the group mobilized once Anderson was seen, raising doubts about Wright's claims of coincidence. I said that when I was reading. Page 73. He states Trayvon Lane recognized Anderson only by face and attire, not by name. Wright emphasizes that there were no premeditated plan to retaliate in Vegas. However, the quick escalation and the way Wright justifies identification based on S's on hats and jerseys implies the group was hyper aware of their rivals and on alert, which undercuts the narrative that the incident was unplanned. So we're going to close this one up. And we're going to pull up the last. We're going to pull up the last. Let me see where we was at. Boom. Oh, yeah. All right, boom. So I think that's pretty much it. I was just making sure that I went over all of my notes. Yeah. So there you have it. Yeah, there you have it. That's pretty much it. We had to break this shit down. The contradictions in Reggie Wrong's grand jury hearing. I know that I'm blowed, dehydrated. It was a lot of reading. Thank y'all for sticking with me through all of that reading. Hour and 20 minutes. We're going to get this out to y'all, and then we'll be going live tonight. Turn on those notifications. Hit that like button. Show a little bit of respect. Take them chucks off at the front door, my nigga. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you ain't did that. Go to the Patreon for all of the exclusive Active Chucks Patreon for all the exclusive content that we can't put on YouTube because they'll get us. They're already trying to get us. Hey, we out of here. Salute ETE. edified through entertainment. Hashtag expose the exposers. Duse M's the dime. Damu Keyway. Conversations. We out.